My heavenly home is bright and fair. I feel like traveling on. Nor pain nor death can enter there. I feel like traveling on. Yes, I feel like traveling on. I feel like traveling on. My heavenly home is bright and fair. I feel like traveling on. The Lord has been so good to me. I feel like traveling on until that blessed home I see. I feel like traveling on. Yes, I feel like traveling on. I feel like traveling on. My heavenly home is bright and fair. I feel like traveling on.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So, as you know, Sunday night we finished up our the last character in our little series. So I figured we'd do one more character tonight, and that's the character Job. So tonight we're going to turn to what I think is one of the most profound and oddly mysterious books in the Bible, and that, like I said, that's Job. If you've ever asked, why am I suffering? Where is God in my pain? Or what did I do to deserve this? Then you're in the company of Job. A man who lost everything, questioned everything, but ultimately gained something far greater, a deeper encounter with God. First part of our lesson tonight is going to look at Job's righteousness and suffering. Job was blameless. The book opens by telling us that Job was blameless and upright, one who feared God and shunned evil. That's Job 1, chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 1. It says here, there was a man in the land of Uz, his name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. He was wealthy, respected, and blessed with a large family. Yet, in a cosmic scene in heaven, Satan challenges Job's motives. Does Job fear God for nothing? That's chapter 1, verse 9. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for no reason? So God allows Job to be tested. God permits Satan to test Job, first by taking his possessions and children, then by afflicting his health. Let's pause here. This troubles many of us. Why would God allow suffering in the life of someone so faithful? Let's not rush to explain suffering. Let's instead sit with Job as he tears his robes, shaves his head, and falls to the ground in grief. But what does he say? Naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's Job 1, verse 21. Some might say this is denial, that Job is looking at his situation and thinking, there's no way God could let this happen because of how faithful and righteous I am. But it says here that in fact this isn't denial, it's faith in the dark. The second part of our lesson is the long conversations between Job and his friends. That's going to be in Job chapter 3. Job's lament. Job breaks silence in chapter 3 with one of the rawest laments in Scripture. May the day of my birth perish. Job doesn't curse God, but he's brutally honest. He asks why. He protests. He questions God's justice. Have you been there when your prayers turn into pleas and your faith feels like a whisper? God is not offended by our honest cries. The book of Job validates your pain and your questions. The counsel of his friends. Then came the friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, who try to explain Job's suffering. They represent a theology many still cling to. You must have done something wrong. Many of us think when something goes wrong in our lives, or we don't always have the best outcome in life, that it's something we did to deserve it, something we did wrong. That's the reason we're suffering. But Job here, he maintains his innocence and says, I haven't done anything wrong. And he's right. The narrator told us from the start, Job did not suffer because he sinned. This is a key point in the book. Sometimes we suffer not because we're wrong, but because we're right. Because the enemy wants to break our faith. Every Christian knows the stronger Christian you are, the more you're favored by the devil. The more he's going to try and tempt you, the more he's going to try and get to you. But another lesson we can learn from that is that God isn't going to let you go through anything that you can't handle, which is why he allows Satan to tempt Job. The third part of our lesson is the God who speaks from the whirlwind. That's going to be found in Job 38. God finally answers Job's cries. After all the arguments in chapter 38, God answers Job out of the storm. But notice, God doesn't explain why Job suffered. Instead, he asks questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you understand. That's chapter 38, verse 4. God takes Job on a tour of creation. The stars, the seas, the beasts of the earth. What is God saying? God isn't belittling Job. He's reminding him that he, in fact, is God. His ways are higher, and that Job may not understand the suffering, but he can trust in it because it's through God. Sometimes God doesn't give us explanations. He gives us revelation, a vision of his greatness. Fourth part of our lesson is going to be Job's response, surrender and worship. That's going to be found in Job 42. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. That's Job 42, verses 5 through 6. Job doesn't get all the answers, but he gets something better, a deeper experience of God. He moves from secondhand knowledge to firsthand encounter. Before all this, Job was of the knowledge, if you act good, if you behave a certain way, good things will happen. And if you suffer, more than likely it's because you did something wrong. But after his encounter with God, he knows that not only is he in God's favor, but like I said, God's not going to let him go through anything he can't handle. And the fact that he was tempted, the fact that he was tormented by the devil, shows just how just how strong of a Christian he is. In the end, Job doesn't say, now I understand. He says, now I see. The fifth part is restoration and hope. That's going to be found in Job 42, 10 through 17. God restores Job, doubles his wealth, new children, and a long life. This isn't saying every suffering story ends with material blessing, but it reminds us that God sees, knows, and he even redeems. Restoration may not look the same for everyone, but we have this hope. After you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast. That's in 1 Peter 5, verse 10. The book of Job teaches us many things. It teaches us suffering is not always a result of sin. As I read before, and as I've said many times, Job wasn't a sinful man. He was a good Christian that not only obeyed God, but his faith was tremendous. That's why the devil wanted to tempt him, because he wanted to show God that he was so powerful that he could make even the strongest of Christians sin and turn towards God. It also tells us that God is sovereign, even when we don't understand. Even if we don't know what's going on, like I said, most people think, if I'm suffering, it's because I did something wrong. And that's not always the case. It tells us right here in Job that even though we are suffering, God might have a plan for us. God's not going to let us go through something we can't handle. Faith sometimes means trusting without knowing why. That's like when you're a little kid and you ask your parent why you can't do something, and what do they tell you? Because I said so. It's not for us to know, we just have to trust. God is big enough for your questions and pain. God is always there for us. Any question we have, anything we want to know, we can always turn to the Lord, especially through prayer. In the end, God gives himself, and that is enough. No matter what we have at the end of the day, we can always rest assured that we have God. Even though we might not have friends, we might not even have family, but we will always have God. See, and here God shows Job that even though you've been tormented, even though you've been punished for nothing you did, you can always turn to me, you can always lean on me because I'll always be there. And having that faith and having that trust in God made Job not only have a stronger faith with God, but it also doubled his material possessions. And I think the biggest thing we can learn from Job, like I said, Job didn't understand why at first. But just by trusting in God, by leaning on His Word, he came out on top at the end. He may not have seen it in the beginning, but as time went on, he kept that same faith in God and was able, like I said, double his material possessions and gain an even stronger faith with the Lord. Does anybody have any questions? Any comments, anything like that?
Yeah, thank you for that. Job is a good example for us. I know we all go through suffering, even if we are Christians, and it doesn't mean that we did anything wrong to cause the suffering. Right. And I think a lot of people misunderstand it and think that, they will also use the suffering in the world in general as an excuse to doubt God, doubt His existence. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that there's not a God and that He's not with us.
Right. Well, I think a lot of us go through stuff in everyday life that we're like, what did I do to deserve this? Was I ugly to somebody? Did I do something I wasn't supposed to? This stuff just happens. And that's perfect opportunities for us to lean on the Lord and know that He'll take care of us, and we don't have to worry about anything else. Now that's why I picked Job, because I think that, even though this is an Old Testament story and everything, there's still a lot we can learn from him even today. Like I said, we all go through stuff each and every day that we're like, man, why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? Might not have done anything at all. That could be the devil tempting you and giving you an opportunity to either succumb to his temptations or to have faith and lean on the Lord.
I can't imagine what Job went through, how hard it would have been.
Oh, yeah.
But he kept his faith.
Mm-hmm. We'll say if someone like Job, who had his big family, had all this livestock, these great big properties, all taken from him in the blink of an eye, and he was able to keep his faith in God, not turn towards Him, and to keep being that strong Christian, I don't think any of us have, all of a sudden walk outside, turn around, and our houses have fallen down on top of our whole families or anything like that. So if he's able to keep his faith and keep being that strong Christian through something like that, surely we can do the same with, little day inconveniences in life. If there's nothing else, we can help you with prayers. He can help you with baptism. Like you come forward while we stand, while we sing.
So all three verses, 256. Who at the door is standing, patiently drawing near, entrance within demanding, whose is the voice I hear? Sweetly the tones are falling, open the door for me. If thou wilt heed my calling, I will abide with thee. All through the dark hours dreary, knocking again is He. Jesus, art thou not weary, waiting so long for me? Sweetly the tones are falling, open the door for me. If thou wilt heed my call,